Hey friends, I'm back with a new lesson. In today's lesson, I'm going to teach you how to use the auxiliary verb do. Now, in today's lesson, you're going to learn how to use do, does and did. Okay. So, to use do, we use it in interrogative sentences. Interrogative means when you ask a question. For example, do you know him? Now what has happened is we generally, we speak very informally or colloquially. So we have forgotten how to use the auxiliary verb do. What we actually do is we change our tone, or we use a different intonation and ask, you know him? So the opposite person understands that you are asking a question. But actually that is not the correct way to ask a question. Grammatically, to form a correct interrogative sentence, you put the auxiliary verb do. So, do you know him? Now, this is a simple present tense interrogative statement. So, when you ask a question in the simple present tense, you have to use the auxiliary verb do. Okay. Now, moving on to the next example, does he work? This is also a simple present tense, but we use does for the third person singular, like he, she, it. So, I do, you do, he, she, it does, we do and they do. There is no difference between do and does. They both play the role of or they both are used in the simple present tense interrogative statement, but does is used for the third person. So, he here is a third person. So, you use does. You cannot say do he work. You can say do they work, but for a third person, please remember you say does he work. Alright, so for the simple present tense interrogative statements, you use do for I, you, we, they, and for the third person, you use does. That is for he, she or it. Okay. Moving on to the next, did he come yesterday? Now, when you ask a question, something relating to the past, you will use did. Did is the past form of do. Now, when you use did, please remember the main verb always comes in the present or the base form. You cannot say did he came, or did he went. This is wrong, because the auxiliary verb, or what we call generally the supporting verb, is already in the past tense. So, the verb following did always has to come in the present. So, did he come yesterday? This is your simple past question. Did he come yesterday? Now, I hope this is very clear to you. Please remember, we use do, does or did for interrogative statements in the present and past respectively. Now, I'm going to be back and show you more uses of the auxiliary verb do. Now, let's take a look at do in negative sentences. We use do when we want to make a negative statement. For example, I don't know him. So, this is a simple present negative statement. Now what happens, a lot of people don't use don't and they say I am not know him or I not know him, which is wrong. You have to use don't in a negative statement for a simple present tense. Similarly, in my next example, he doesn't work. This is also a simple present. But like I said in my earlier examples in interrogative, we use does or doesn't in case of a third person. Okay, so he doesn't work, not he not work. This is wrong. Friends, again, please remember do and does or don't or doesn't, both are simple present tense used for interrogative or negative. The only difference is do is used for I, you, we, they, and does is used for he, she, it. Okay. Moving on to the next example, he didn't come yesterday. Now, I'm talking about something in the past. I'm making a negative statement. So, I have to use the auxiliary did, which is did not. Okay. For the simple past, he did not come. Again, please remember the verb comes in the present form. So please don't say he didn't came or he didn't went, he didn't come. So we took a look at how do is used in negative and interrogative sentences. Now let's see how we use the auxiliary verb do to emphasize an affirmative statement. An affirmative statement is nothing but a positive statement. For example, you do look tired. Now I can even say you look tired. But when I want to emphasize, I'll say you do look tired. So I'm emphasizing and telling that you do look tired. Similarly, in my next example, I told him not to go, but he did go. Now here I can even say I told him not to go, but he went. Okay. So I'll say but he went. But because I want to emphasize and say despite telling him not to go, he did, I'll say I told him not to go, but he did go. Please remember, the verb after did is always in the present tense. So, but he did go. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the next condition, imperative sentences. Now, what are imperative sentences? Imperative sentences are basically sentences when you make requests, commands or orders. You do not have a subject, like here you have you, I, here there are no subjects. So, for example, a teacher shouts at a student and tells him, leave my class. So she says, get out of my class. She does not say you get out. She says get out. So that's an imperative sentence. She is making an order and there is no subject. Alright. So here I have two examples. The first one, do be quiet. Now here I can even say be quiet. But you know, when I am persuading an imperative sentence or a request or a command or an order, it's similar to this. You're emphasizing, you're sounding more persuasive. You say, okay, I'm going to be back soon, so do be quiet. Okay, so when you persuade someone in an imperative sentence, you use do. Please remember, in imperative sentences, we never use does. It's always do. In my next example, do come on time for the meeting. Well, I can even say come on time for the meeting tomorrow, but when I'm emphasizing, I'm persuading or convincing, I say do come on time for the meeting. Now let's take a look at the last condition on how to use do. Okay. Now we also use do when we want to avoid the repetition of a verb in a sentence. For example, my friend says, she sings well, Maria sings well, and when I agree, I say yes, she does. Well, instead of saying yes, she sings well or just simply, yeah, I say yes, she does. So here does because it's the third person. Now the verb is sings. Okay. So instead of saying yes, she sings well, does is avoiding the repetition of sings. Fine. In my next example, he likes chocolates. Now here the verb is likes. Okay. He likes chocolates and so do you. So instead of saying and you like chocolates too, I can say so do you. So the auxiliary do is replacing the previous verb likes in the sentence. So you can say so do you. In my third example, do you know him? Instead of saying yes, I know him, you say yes, I do. So here do is replacing the verb know. That means you do not repeat the verb know, you say yes, I do. Or for example, I say my friend works very hard. So you say so do I. So that means you are replacing do with the previous verb works in the sentence. So friends, this brings me to the end of this lesson. Please remember to use do, does and did correctly. Let's take a quick recap. We use do as an auxiliary verb in negative sentences, as in interrogative, to emphasize an affirmative statement, to avoid repetition of a previous verb, and in imperative sentences. I hope you find this lesson useful. Please do put in your comments and queries if any. I'm going to be back very soon. Till then, take care and bye.